Welcome. In this video, we'll walk through how to convert an expiring national residence permit into the EU spouse residency card, also known as the residence card of a family member of a union citizen. First, we'll set the scene, then explain the crucial first step, registering the EU citizen, and finally move into documentation, timelines, and practical tips. Let's begin by outlining what we'll cover. Here is today's agenda. First, we will cover why transitioning to an EU spouse card is beneficial. Next, we will detail the EU citizen's mandatory registration as the foundation of rights. Then, we will enumerate the required documents. After that, we will explain how to convert your status and when to do it. Subsequently, we will outline processing times, rights while pending, and a realistic timeline. Finally, we will conclude with pitfalls to avoid and professional tips. Before we dive in, a quick disclaimer. This video shares general information based on EU free movement law and common administrative practice. However, requirements and procedures vary across member states and even local offices. Therefore, always verify with your local immigration authority or consult a qualified immigration lawyer for advice tailored to your case. With that in mind, let's move to the big picture. At a high level, your goal is to move from a national immigration scheme to a more robust EU law status. The essential logic is straightforward. The non-EU spouse's rights depend on the EU citizen's lawful residence in the host member state. Consequently, establishing the EU citizen's legal presence is the necessary first step. Now let's unpack why that registration comes first. Registration by the EU citizen is mandatory for stays exceeding 3 months. This is not optional. The non-EU spouse's right to reside comes directly from the EU citizen's legal residence status in the host state. Therefore, the first operational step is registering the EU citizen at the appropriate specialized office, not at general police stations. The required documentation revolves around identity, proof of accommodation and cohabitation, and proof of sufficient resources and comprehensive sickness insurance. Importantly, unemployment is not disqualifying as long as sufficient resources and health coverage are demonstrated. Next, let's visualize the end-to-end process. This flowchart outlines the journey. You start on a national permit. If the EU spouse will remain beyond 3 months, they must register. To do so, they provide identity, accommodation evidence, and proof of resources and health care. After registration, they receive the EU Certificate of Registration. Immediately afterward, the non-EU spouse applies for the EU Spouse Residence Card under Article 10 of Directive 2004/38. That application triggers a protected pending status, typically allowing residence and work even if the old permit expires during processing. Finally, upon approval, a 5-year residence card is issued. Now let's detail the EU citizen's registration steps. To register, first identify the specialized office in your locality, such as the Directorate of Immigration, Aliens Office, or Decentralized Administration. Next, confirm whether you need an appointment. Prepare a valid passport or national ID. Then gather accommodation evidence, which can include a lease, a cohabitation declaration, a utility bill in the EU citizen's name, or a landlord confirmation. Assemble proof of sufficient resources, like bank statements or an employment contract, and proof of comprehensive health insurance. Attend the appointment, submit the documents, and request the certificate of registration. Depending on local practice, you may receive it immediately or later by mail. With the certificate in hand, you're ready for the non-EU spouse's application. This table summarizes the main documents. For the EU citizen, valid ID, accommodation proof, and evidence of sufficient resources and comprehensive insurance. For the non-EU spouse, valid passport, a marriage certificate with translation and apostille or certification as applicable, the EU spouse's registration certificate, proof of the genuine relationship and cohabitation, and the expiring national residence card for reference. Next, let's compare the national permit with the EU spouse card. On the left, The national permit is governed by a specific national immigration scheme, which can be tied to employment or particular local categories, and may offer shorter validity with more constraints on EU mobility. On the right, the EU spouse card derives directly from EU law and is not conditioned on the same national schemes. It typically comes with 5-year validity and is widely recognized across the EU and EEA, affording stronger mobility and legal standing. Moving forward, let's focus on the most scrutinized area: proving resources and healthcare. Authorities scrutinize sufficiency of resources and the presence of comprehensive healthcare. If unemployed, combine savings evidence with private insurance to meet the threshold. Ensure insurance is comprehensive and continuous, avoiding lapses. If you have large deposits or irregular cash flow, be ready to explain their origin. Always bring originals alongside copies, because some offices retain copies for the file. With financial and insurance evidence prepared, let's test your understanding with a quick question. Quiz time. What is the critical first step before the non-EU spouse applies for the EU spouse card? Option A. Apply directly for the EU spouse card. Option B. Register the EU citizen's residence at the specialized office. Option C. Visit a general police station. Option D. Wait until the national permit expires. You may pause the video now to consider your answer. We will discuss the correct answer in the next section. The correct answer is to register the EU citizen's residence at the specialized office. The non-EU spouse's application rests on the EU spouse's lawful presence in the host member state, evidenced by the registration certificate. Now that we've confirmed the sequence, let's map a realistic timeline. This timeline illustrates a pragmatic sequence. On day 0, the EU citizen registers or books the appointment. By week 1, you gather and finalize documents. In week 2, the non-EU spouse submits the EU spouse card application. Immediately after submission, applicants typically receive a receipt or temporary document that confirms the right to reside, and often to work, while the application is pending. Around month 3, you may attend biometrics or verification if required. By month 6, many cases receive a decision, with card production and collection following shortly afterward. Note that rights while pending generally continue even if the national permit expires, assuming you filed the application before expiry. Next, let's detail the non-EU spouse's application pack. When applying for the EU spouse card, submit before the national permit expires. Prepare the non-EU spouse's valid passport, the marriage certificate with official translation and apostille or certification as required, the EU spouse's original registration certificate, and evidence of a genuine relationship and cohabitation, such as joint financial records and shared address proof. Include the expiring national card for reference. Following submission, you will typically receive a temporary status that allows you to stay, and often to work, while the application is processed. To help you collect proof efficiently, let's map the evidence types. This mind map organizes your evidence into 4 buckets: cohabitation, relationship proof, resources, and healthcare. Within cohabitation, include your lease, any landlord confirmation, and a utility bill in the EU spouse's name if possible. Relationship proof includes the marriage certificate, joint financial documentation, and, where appropriate, travel records or photos to demonstrate continuity. Resources include savings statements, employment or contract evidence, or a sponsor letter if permitted. Healthcare refers to public system registration where applicable, or a private comprehensive policy. Create a clearly labeled folder structure and cross-reference each document to the relevant application section. Now let's test one more key concept. Second quiz question. Does unemployment of both partners automatically block the EU spouse card process? Option A. Yes, unemployment blocks it. Option B. No, if the EU citizen proves sufficient resources and comprehensive health insurance. Option C. Only if the non-EU spouse is unemployed. Option D. It depends on the marriage duration only. You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss it in the next section. The correct answer is that unemployment does not automatically block the process, as long as the EU citizen can show sufficient resources and comprehensive health insurance. The authorities focus on avoiding an unreasonable burden on the social assistance system and ensuring proper healthcare coverage. With that clarified, let's distill the most important takeaways. Key takeaways. Always register the EU spouse before anything else. Use only the specialized immigration or aliens office. Ensure your marriage certificate is properly translated and apostilled or certified if needed. File the non-EU spouse application before the national permit expires to secure protected status while pending. Document financial sufficiency and health care comprehensively. Retain copies of all submissions and obtain a receipt for your records. Now, let's wrap up with a concise summary. In summary, begin by registering the EU citizen, as that creates the legal basis for the non-EU spouse's rights. Then submit the spouse application before the national permit expires. While your application is pending, you generally retain the right to remain and often to work. Prepare solid evidence across accommodation, resources, healthcare, and relationship. The end goal is a 5-year EU spouse card that offers stronger recognition and stability. Before we close, here's a final note of appreciation and a call to action. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, please like the video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more practical immigration guides. Tell us about your experience or questions in the comments so we can help others learn from real cases.